According to eyewitnesses, the car hit a wall in a tunnel on one of the fast-flowing roads which runs alongside the River Seine. They were apparently being pursued at high speed by photographers on motorbikes. Within minutes of the crash, the area was sealed off as police and ambulance teams struggled to reach the four trapped inside. Dodi Al-Fayed, the princess's constant companion in recent weeks, was dead at the scene, as was their chauffeur. The princess and her bodyguard had to be cut from the wreckage. Both were taken to hospital with serious injuries. But those who witnessed the aftermath of the accident knew the gravity of what they were seeing.
We saw a large blue Mercedes, darker blue, and the airbag on the passenger side was deployed. And we saw a lot of liquid on the ground, and we didn't know who it was at the time. Somebody came running towards us, speaking French, shouting in French, and we thought for some reason it was going to blow up in the tunnel. We stood there, watched a little bit, and police came about 7 to 10 minutes later, ambulance about 15 minutes later.
Immediately after the crash, police took away a motorbike for further investigation. The high-speed chase with photographers on bikes pursuing the car is thought to have begun as the couple left the Ritz Hotel, where they'd been having dinner. The hotel belongs to Mr. Al-Fayed's father, and the man driving them was a security agent from the Ritz. Police have arrested 5 photographers, and one is said to have been beaten up by someone who saw the accident. Certainly, eyewitnesses say the paparazzi were on the scene within seconds.
I was one of the first 3 people in the tunnel. The driver was unconscious, sounding the horn for probably almost 2 minutes. Well, initially when I approached the vehicle, the gentleman who was taking pictures, and his camera equipment was far too sophisticated for a tourist or someone not professional, I assumed, associated with the press.
But whilst police began to gather evidence for their investigation into what had happened, and less than 5 hours after the accident, the announcement was made that Diana, Princess of Wales, had died in hospital. The first government reaction came from the other side of the world, where the Foreign Secretary is visiting the Philippines.
I am greatly shocked by this news. Our first thoughts must be with her children and with her family at this time of immense loss to them. I was fortunate to have the opportunity of working with the Princess on her international charity work. I believe what has happened is a tragic loss at a young age of someone who'd shown great courage and commitment in drawing attention to serious issues. For the next few days, her family and the nation must have time to come to terms with their immense sadness and loss. In the longer term, serious questions will need to be asked as to whether the aggressive intrusion into her privacy has contributed to this tragedy.
Those are questions which will be asked in coming days, but at the moment the investigation has only just begun, and few have yet grasped the full impact of this tragedy. Alison Holt, BBC News.
And we're getting reports that police in Paris are saying it is too early to say whether the 7 paparazzi who pursued the Princess of Wales car would be charged with any offence. The men were being questioned as witnesses to the accident, according to a report from Paris. Princess Diana supported many charities and causes. One of the people she came to know well was the leading heart surgeon, Sir Magdi Yaqub. A short time ago, he paid tribute to the work the princess had done.
I'm absolutely devastated. I think it's a fantastic loss, great loss. I describe her as a person who's very warm, very concerned, typifies the best of human qualities. I mean, a really extraordinary person. She had deep, genuine concern for the plight, for example, of heart patients, children, others from different countries, from this country. And she wanted to know more. I mean, really, she was highly intelligent, sensitive, wanting to find out what hurts these people. Can she do something about it? How can she be part of this? How can she help? I wanted to know. This inquisitive, strong mind. This is incredible.
Well, joining our court correspondent Jenny Bond now is Susie Parsons from the London Lighthouse, a hospice which specialises in AIDS patients and which the Princess visited regularly. Can you tell me the impact of her work for the London Lighthouse?
Well, she was the most tremendous supporter of London Lighthouse, and in a very personal capacity. She did come nearly a year ago now to launch a major capital appeal for funds for the Lighthouse, but it's not so much that we will remember, although we do thank her for it. It's the very personal, the very warm sense that she brought. Many of our service users have met her several times over the years, because she would very often come just on a very private, informal visit, which never got into the press, and just visit people and talk with them. And there is just the most tremendous sense of loss and shock at Lighthouse now, because we really did feel very, very close to her.
Susie, many charities, not just the Lighthouse, talk about the incredible magnetism that she had and this incredibly special rapport with people. How would you sum that up?
It was extraordinary. I mean, I've never seen anybody be able to come into a group of people who would perhaps be a bit nervous about meeting a princess and so on, and within about 2 minutes she'd have them laughing and joking, and she'd really put them at their ease. And it was always, when she came, it was always a very a lot of fun, not heavy at all. She was just had this ability to really make people relax and talk to them just as a person, and they'd really forget that she was a princess and just deal with her as a real person.
And what kind of things did the patients say after her visit was over? Oh,
well, she's just like us, isn't she? Isn't she wonderful? You know, she's just a real person. That was very much the feeling that people have, and that I think it's irreplaceable, and you know, it just is a most tremendous loss to us all, really.
Have the patients at the London Lighthouse been told this morning about what has happened?
Yes, those who are well enough will already have been
Do you know what their reaction was?
As I say, the most tremendous feeling of loss and shock. In fact, we were expecting her, and I wouldn't have been saying this in other circumstances, but we were expecting her for a visit the week after next, just a very private visit, which would never have been in the press or on the television or anything. And you know, it's terrible to think now that she won't be coming, and she won't be coming anymore. And that's very much the reaction that people have now that they've heard this dreadful news.
Her diary for years was filled with many charitable engagements. What do you think her contribution was to the voluntary sector in Britain? How will the voluntary sector as a whole remember her?
I think obviously as somebody who helped us in our fundraising efforts by raising the profile of the organisations that she worked with, and I mean that's very important for all charities, but overwhelmingly I think as somebody who brought just that very personal touch, and who had a real sense of commitment and a real understanding of the very complicated issues that she got involved with. I mean, homelessness, landmines, HIV, these are very complex matters, and she really did have a great understanding, certainly in my experience, of HIV and its effects on people's lives, and a compassion that it really touched everybody's heart, I think.
Do you recall the impact of that handshake with an AIDS patient?
Absolutely. I mean,
what did that do for people with AIDS and those who were looking after them?
I think that was tremendously important. It's a while ago now, and fortunately, although some people, there is still a stigma attached to being HIV positive, to having AIDS, it's very much less than it was those years ago. And I think that Princess Diana, sitting on somebody's bed and holding their hand, a person with AIDS, that just had the most tremendous effect, both in terms of how those people who perhaps didn't have a very good understanding of HIV and AIDS viewed it. People felt less scared because the princess was able to do that. But also in terms of people who are HIV positive, just that feeling that a member of the royal family, this very special and important person, would would do that and would sit and chat and hold hands with somebody was extremely important, I think.
Well, Susie Parsons, thank you for adding to the welter of tributes that are coming in for the Princess of Wales. In fact, Jenny, you have many more.
There are many more, yes. Another from one of the charities she still supported. The English National Ballet said that it would be a tremendous loss. She's just irreplaceable. And from around the world tributes, President Chirac in France has said he learnt with great shock of the princess's death. She was a young woman, a woman of our age, warm, full of life and generosity. Her death would be deeply felt because she was such a familiar figure to everyone, and I think that's very true. And in Scotland, the moderator of the General Assembly of the Church of Scotland, the Right Reverend Sandy MacDonald, said the people of the Church of Scotland and the whole of Scotland would be deeply shocked, and what would be uppermost in everyone's minds, he said, would be concern for the children, of course.
Jenny, we heard from Susie just a moment ago about what the princess did for other people. What do you think the princess herself got out of these visits?
I think she told me that she drew enormous strength from these people. She saw their suffering and yet saw how they endured and carried on with their lives. And it made her feel strong and it made her feel full, is what she said. So when she got back to the palace, she felt terribly empty. And she also felt in the sadness of her marriage, there was no one to replenish that emptiness. And I think by going out and carrying on with this work, she fulfilled her life.
But those visits to charitable organisations gave her a kind of strength that enabled her to deal with the various crises in her personal life.
Indeed, I think so. I think she would not have quarrelled with the idea that she became almost addicted, if you like, to going out and doing this good work, because she had such a powerful sense of vocation.
Jenny and Susie, thank you very much for joining us. And we have one extra piece of news, that French police are reported to have said that the body of Diana, Princess of Wales, will be flown back to Britain later today. Well, members of the public have already been paying their own tributes. Flowers have been laid at Kensington Palace and at Buckingham Palace. Clarence Mitchell reports.
From first light at Kensington Palace, people had begun laying flowers. Those paying their respects to the princess outside her official London home, united by a stunned sense of utter disbelief at what had happened overnight in Paris.
She touched groups of people that had never been touched by the royal family before. She did, for example, in the case of AIDS, she did so much to change public attitudes just by this very simple things, by touching people's hands and by holding them.
She was just a shining light, and she was there for everybody. And I'm just glad towards the end she found happiness. At least she died knowing real happiness, I think.
She was just a wonderful person. I think that she's completely irreplaceable. I don't think anyone could take her place, and I think it's going to leave a terrible void in everybody's lives, especially her two sons.
She meant a lot to me. The fact is that Diana is one of the members of the royal family that the nation identifies with most, and the fact that she did a lot of work for the charities really touched my heart. And although I'm not really a royalist, I really feel compelled to come here this morning and leave these flowers for her. I'm just completely shocked. It just sounds so absurd that, well, the best one of the lot had to go first.
And at Buckingham Palace too, similar scenes. The grief being immediately felt on the streets of the capital is undoubtedly a mere foretaste of the national mourning yet to come. Clarence Mitchell, BBC News.
Well, now let's catch up with our correspondents around the country. Joining me first from Kensington Palace is Steve Evans. Steve, I see crowds already beginning to gather there.
That's right. There's a file of people down this alleyway to the gates of Kensington Palace, where they are placing flowers, simple flowers often. The first one at 5:30 this morning, a bunch of white lilies wrapped in newspaper, and since then, ordinary flowers have been going down with handwritten inscriptions. It shouldn't have happened to you. We will miss you, that kind of thing. There's also a media gathering here, as you can probably see. But actually what's really happening here is most people are just standing around simply looking. There is a stunned disbelief here, really, I think.
Yes, because it is clearly going to be some time before the people in Britain come to terms with what has happened. She was so much a part of the British scene and indeed of people's hearts.
That's right. This is the middle of one of the entertainment areas of London, and a lot of people early on were people going home from the night out. And these, in a way, were Diana's people. A lot of gay people have come up and said, echoing previous thoughts, that the one moment when she touched them, as it were, was when she touched that that AIDS patient in the hospital. So a lot of ordinary people have taken time out to come here and express that sentiment.
Steve, thank you. Neil Bennett is at Buckingham Palace. Neil, what's the reaction there?
Well, the same sense of shock and grief, and this is obviously going to be a natural focal point for the nation's sadness today. And within the past half hour, the police have been clearing people away from a little bit back from Buckingham Palace and put out metal barriers, because they're obviously expecting that a lot more ordinary people will be coming here during the day just to make their own direct personal contribution to the nation's grief.
So we're talking about a silent mourning in front of Buckingham Palace.
Yes, we're talking about just very simple, very direct gestures that people felt that they had to make at the moment they heard the news. The first person here was a minicab driver who heard the news on the radio. He went straight into an all-night store and bought a bunch of flowers and came down here and put it down by the gates of Buckingham Palace. The news was announced to a group of youngsters in a nightclub in the West End. The DJ announced the news, the nightclub immediately emptied. Groups of young people came down here at about 5 o'clock in the morning, all of them carrying single red roses. They laid them down by the gates of Buckingham Palace, and they said they'd done so simply because they wanted to express their feeling that Diana had been an inspiration to young people.
Neil, thank you. And joining me from Harrods is our correspondent, Duncan Kennedy. Duncan, Harrods, of course, is the empire which Dodi Fayed was going to inherit had he lived from his father. So a deep sense of sadness there as well.
Exactly that, Martin. Dodi was the eldest of 5 children, and he would have inherited it, being the eldest child. You can see from Harrods behind me here, the flags are flying at half-mast, the Union Jacks here, and also a number of bouquets of flowers have been placed in the door handles of this most famous store, many of them in Arabic language, from the Al Fayed Egyptian family, of course. But there's one rather poignant one in English, a simple little card saying, sorry, the only word on that card. There have also been other people turning up here, many tourists, because Harrods obviously is a world-famous store. One nun who was visiting London came up to us and said she heard the news on BBC Radio this morning, and all she could do was say a prayer, having heard that news. And there was one other man who was an Australian man. His daughter was watching some cricket in Australia. The information was flashed up on the information board at that cricket match. She rang him, and he felt as though he had to come to somewhere to express his grief.
Duncan, thank you. And Robin Oakley is at Downing Street. Robin, the reaction there?
Well, Tony Blair took the view, the Prime Minister, that Princess Diana was a huge asset to Britain, and I understand he is going to get involved in the funeral arrangements. Obviously, we'll be talking to the palace authorities at some later stage to see what can be done to mark the nation's mourning. But politicians mostly are struggling for the right words of dismay and horror at this tragedy, and I think Paddy Ashdown probably got closest to it when he talked about a star burning brightly, being extinguished from people's lives.
And any arrangements for the funeral yet? We did hear earlier that the body of the Princess of Wales is being flown back to London later today.
No, we don't have any detailed news yet of any funeral arrangements. That will come a little bit later in the proceedings. I think for the moment the chief concern is with the family's grief and with the 2 boys who are left without a mother.
Robin Oakley in Downing Street, thank you very much indeed. And you join us as we come up to the hour with this special programme, To Britain and the World. This is BBC Television from London. Diana, Princess of Wales, has died after a car crash in Paris. She was taken to a hospital in the city early this morning. Surgeons spent 2 hours trying to save her life, but she died at 4 o'clock from severe chest injuries. Diana, Princess of Wales, had been a passenger in a car which crashed in a tunnel next to the River Seine. Her friend, Dodi Fayed, and their driver, a security man from the Ritz Hotel in Paris, were also killed. The accident happened as press photographers pursued the princess's car at high speeds through a tunnel under the Place de l'Alma in the centre of the city. The princess's Mercedes hit a road pillar and smashed into a wall. The French authorities have begun a criminal investigation. 7 photographers are being questioned as witnesses. Tributes to Diana, Princess of Wales, have been coming in. A spokesman for the Archbishop of Canterbury said the prayers of the Archbishops of Canterbury and York will be with the families of Diana, Princess of Wales, and Mr. Al-Fayed at this tragic moment. Cardinal Hume, leader of the Roman Catholic Church in England and Wales, said, "I am greatly distressed at the news of Princess Diana and the awful suddenness in which it came upon us all." A spokesman for Mother Teresa of Calcutta said she was very sorry and that she was praying for her. There has been reaction from politicians here. The Prime Minister said he was utterly devastated. The whole of our country, all of us, will be in a state of shock and mourning. The Leader of the Opposition, William Hague, said he was absolutely shocked. The whole nation will be in shock and in tears at this awful news. The Liberal Democrat leader, Paddy Ashdown, said, "I am speechless with shock at the horror and sadness of this terrible tragedy." And tributes have been paid by world leaders. The French President, Jacques Chirac, said, "Diana, Princess of Wales, was a young woman of our age, warm, full of life and generosity." President Clinton said he and his wife were profoundly saddened by this tragic event. And the Australian Prime Minister, John Howard, said the death of Diana, Princess of Wales, will shock and sadden Australians. The owner of Harrods, whose son died in the car crash, said the deaths were appalling and quite needless. The world, he said, had lost a princess who is simply irreplaceable. Our correspondent, Alison Holt, now reports.
Twisted almost beyond recognition, the wreckage of the Mercedes in which the princess was travelling. The crash happened shortly after midnight. According to eyewitnesses, the car hit a wall in a tunnel on one of the fast-flowing roads which runs alongside the River Seine. They were apparently being pursued at high speed by photographers on motorbikes. Within minutes of the crash, the area was sealed off as police and ambulance teams struggled to reach the four trapped inside. Dodi Al-Fayed, the princess's constant companion in recent weeks, was dead at the scene, as was their chauffeur. The princess and her bodyguard had to be cut from the wreckage. Both were taken to hospital with serious injuries. Those who witnessed the aftermath of the accident knew the gravity of what they were seeing.
We saw a large blue Mercedes, darker blue, and the airbag on the passenger side was deployed. And we saw a lot of liquid on the ground, and we didn't know who it was at the time. Somebody came running towards us, speaking French, shouting in French, and we thought for some reason it was going to blow up in the tunnel. We stood there, watched a little bit, and police came about 7 to 10 minutes later. Ambulance about 15 minutes later.
At the hospital, there was no word on the princess's condition for several hours, but inside doctors were fighting to save her. She had severe internal injuries and underwent emergency surgery. But just before 5 o'clock this morning, the French Interior Minister Jean-Pierre Chevènement broke the tragic news that the princess had died.
Au nom du gouvernement français,
he expressed the regret of the French people, but it was the British ambassador to Paris who voiced the deep shock and sorrow that was felt by all.
Tonight's accident is a terrible tragedy. The death of the Princess of Wales fills us all with deep shock and with deep grief. And our thoughts and our prayers are with her family and her friends, and with the family and friends of the others who died in the accident. The Queen and the Prince of Wales and the Prime Minister have been informed of the accident and of the death of the Princess of Wales. I should like to take this opportunity to thank the Minister and the French authorities and the medical team here at this hospital for all they have done tonight at the time of this terrible tragedy. Thank you.
Immediately after the crash, police took away a motorbike for further investigation. The high-speed chase with photographers on bikes pursuing the car is thought to have begun as the couple left the Ritz Hotel, where they'd been having dinner. The hotel belongs to Mr. Al-Fayed's father, and the man driving them was a security agent from the Ritz. Mr. Al-Fayed's spokesman says the whole family is devastated.
I've spoken to Mr. Al-Fayed, and his view is that this is an appalling and quite needless tragedy. the world has lost a princess who is simply irreplaceable, and Mr. Al Fayed has lost his beloved eldest son. Mr. and Mrs. Al Fayed are devastated by their loss, and they share the sorrow of the princess's family.
Police have already begun gathering evidence for their investigation into what happened, and 7 photographers have been arrested. Political reaction to the tragedy was swift. The first came from the other side of the world, where the Foreign Secretary is visiting the Philippines.
I am greatly shocked by this news. Our first thoughts must be with her children and with her family at this time of immense loss to them. I was fortunate to have the opportunity of working with the Princess on her international charity work. I believe what has happened is a tragic loss at a young age of someone who'd shown great courage and commitment in drawing attention to serious issues. For the next few days, her family and the nation must have time to come to terms with their immense sadness and loss. In the longer term, serious questions will need to be asked as to whether the aggressive intrusion into her privacy has contributed to this tragedy.
She was an incredible figure. She had real star quality, as we will all never forget, and she used her position to do a great deal of good on drug issues, on AIDS issues, and so on. Of course, she was from time to time a controversial figure. I think it's, as Robin Cook has said, people will need to ask questions about intrusion into private life, but it's also too early to draw any general conclusions from one terrible incident.
The nation will be speechless with the tragedy of this event and the horror of it, and like everybody else, I'm sure we'll want to extend our sympathy and our prayers and our thoughts to her closest family, clearly the princes and the Prince of Wales, and the wider family beyond that, together with, of course, Mr. Al Fayed. This is an event, the tragedy of which I think supersedes any other kind of comment you can make at the moment.
And outside the princess's home, Kensington Palace, people have already begun laying flowers in tribute.
She was just a shining light, and she was there for everybody. And I'm just glad towards the end she found happiness. At least she died knowing real happiness, I think.
I just think she was just a wonderful person. I think that she's completely irreplaceable. I don't think anyone could take her place, and I think it's going to leave a terrible void in everybody's lives, especially her 2 sons, and people close to her, and all the people she cared for, all the hospitals that she visited, and the children.
The tunnel where the accident happened has now been reopened. Alison Holt, BBC News.
And some of this morning's papers have started to catch up with the news of the death of the Princess of Wales and have brought out special editions. Some of them have not. Some of them are rushing editions onto the streets with the news that she was seriously injured. And the Mail on Sunday, for example, 4 a.m. here, tragedy for the Princess as Dodi is killed. Diana very grave after car crash. And inside, the car flipped. Nobody got out. Tragic end to the new romance that had brought hope to the princess. And then we find, as we move on with new deadlines, the Express on Sunday, 6 a.m. news special. It's not often you find Sunday papers in Britain printing this late, but this is a story of enormous magnitude. The poignant headline, simple, black, Diana is dead. Princess and Dodi killed in a car smash. And there we have inside the pictures of them enjoying themselves, some of the last pictures of the Princess of Wales alive. The love story that turned into a tragedy. Diana dies in tunnel smash. Moving on to the broadsheets, which have reacted extremely quickly, faster than some of the tabloids. The Sunday Telegraph, Princess Diana and Dodi are killed in Paris car crash. A spaced out, dramatic 3-line headline. The paparazzi blamed as Mercedes smashes into a wall. And here, the love story that was cut short by tragedy. Again, that last picture of the Princess of Wales with Dodi Fayed, her friend. Here we have the Observer. Di reported dead with Dodi in Paris car crash. The tragedy happens during chase by press, something that we've touched on this morning and which is clearly going to make more headlines in the weeks and months ahead. Joy shattered. And here the talk about the romance between Diana and Dodi Fayed, the son of Harrods boss Mohammed Al Fayed, provoked worldwide press interest. And this is indeed a worldwide story, because there is now massive coverage throughout the world of the kind that the princess enjoyed in her lifetime, but which sadly is now reflecting her death. Tragedy shatters Diana's brief joy, the joy that her relationship with Dodi Fayed reportedly brought to her towards the end of her life. Here in The Independent on Sunday, Diana killed in crash. The princess dies with lover in Paris. And those are the papers, the morning papers in Britain, echoing the headlines that are now flashing right around the world. Well, Nick Hyam, our media correspondent, is in the newsroom now. Nick, I talked earlier about the paparazzi and the role that the paparazzi may have played in the car crash that killed the Princess of Wales. We did hear the Foreign Secretary earlier saying, in the longer term, serious questions will have to be asked whether the aggressive intrusion into her privacy has contributed to this tragedy. Is this going to increase the possibility of a privacy law in Britain?
I think it will certainly increase debate about it. We've had debate many times over the past few years. This is a subject that comes up from time to time, rarely, I think, as dramatically and as tragically as this. The Foreign Secretary is not alone in pointing to the problem not only of the paparazzi and the way they hound princesses and stars, Hollywood stars, pop music stars, but also the fact that newspapers and magazines in Britain and other countries buy and pay very good money for the photographs that they take, and this obviously encourages these freelance people to stalk, to hound, to lay in wait for people like the princess. Whether or not we actually get a privacy law remains, as always, very, very speculative. It's a terribly difficult thing to frame. The last government made several attempts at framing laws which would either prevent publication of things which were intruding into people's privacy, or alternatively would prevent the kind of harassment that appears to have gone on in this case with journalists and photographers stalking people, and they gave up on the attempt. It is extremely difficult to frame a law which prevents undesirable activity, but at the same time doesn't prevent legitimate journalistic inquiry.
We heard from Tony Holden and others that perhaps it's necessary to place pressure on proprietors to do something about this, the people who own the newspapers, who pay these huge sums of money that photographers are jostling for.
Yes, that's right. And in the past, pressure on proprietors has proved effective. I mean, the most remarkable example was when Rupert Murdoch, the owner of the News of the World, publicly criticised his then editor, Piers Morgan, for running a picture of the Princess of Wales' sister-in-law, in fact, when she was in a clinic suffering from anorexia. And the editor, Piers Morgan, very quickly left the paper. So if it's possible for the establishment to get proprietors on its side, then it does have some effect on what happens on the ground in newspaper offices and magazine offices around the world. The difficulty is that pictures of the princess and pictures of other stars are tremendously commercially important. They sell newspapers. The princess was arguably the most famous person in the world. Newspaper and magazine editors knew that. That's why they were prepared to pay such large sums for revealing pictures of her. The same is true of other stars and other royals, and so long as there is this immense public interest, there is always commercial pressure on newspapers and magazines to buy the photographs.
So what you're implying is that even if there was an international understanding among proprietors that they wouldn't put out money for these kind of pictures, that somebody at some stage would be bound to break ranks in their own commercial interests.
Yes, you can envisage a majority of newspaper proprietors, perhaps in Britain, agreeing that they won't buy and publish these photographs. But then it only takes one rogue publisher, one rogue company, which sees an opportunity that others are turning down, to leap in, and the rest of the media may feel that they have to follow suit. It is an enormous problem. It's a particular problem in a country like Britain, where we don't really have laws regulating the press. We have a system of voluntary self-regulation, which obviously depends on everybody agreeing to play by the rules. And if somebody doesn't play by the rules, the whole system risks collapse.
We've heard of the dislike that the princess had for certain sections of the media, but there is this dilemma here, isn't there, that on the one hand, she didn't like the activities of the so-called more frenzied paparazzi. On the other hand, the pictures that other elements of the press took actually helped to build up the image that she had around the world, and indeed helped her considerably in the causes that she espoused?
Yes, I think there were two things she didn't like. One was the activities of paparazzi who would ambush her and stalk her, and the other was some of the stories that were written about her, often with relatively little foundation in fact. There's always tended in royal coverage, there's tended to be a temptation to take a rumour and turn it into a fact, and Britain's tabloids have on occasion been guilty of that, and she didn't like that. But at the same time, she was well aware of her own popularity. She was well aware of the fact that it could do good. She used it quite recently in her campaign against landmines. She went to Bosnia, she went to Angola. She knew that by doing that, lots of photographers would follow her and the whole issue would get a great deal more publicity. She used it to very good effect, as one of your guests was saying a little while ago, when she visited AIDS hospices and raised awareness of AIDS. And at the same time, she sometimes appeared quite shamelessly to be manipulating the media for her own private personal ends, by leaking stories, by being friendly towards particular individual journalists, by, some photographers are convinced, actively posing, even when they were a long way off and taking pictures with a long lens. A lot of photographers used to say, well, she knew we were there and she was posing for us. So she did have a rather ambivalent attitude. She knew that she had a tremendous public profile around the world, and she wasn't above using that.
Nick Hyam, thanks very much for joining us. And I'm joined now from our Bristol studio by Jonathan Dimbleby, the close friend and biographer of the Prince of Wales. Jonathan, what were your impressions of the Princess?
My impressions of the Princess were very much like the impressions that we've been hearing all morning. People who recognised that she was a formidable figure, a remarkable public person, a very beautiful woman who's tragically been cut short before she's even had the chance to fulfil her potential. Someone who endured some happiness and a lot of sadness in her life. And like everyone else, I just share that sense of astonishment and loss that she is suddenly no longer there.
Was it both inevitable and unfair that she should have had this immense public attention paid to her?
Yes, I was listening very carefully to what Nick Hyam was saying just now, and I thought he got it exactly right. She was bound to have attention, not only because until her divorce she would have become queen and because her son will one day become king, but also because in her own right she was an intriguing and fascinating, complex person. She was bound to have that attention. She was able to use that to very good effect for very important causes that she cared about. She was also very susceptible to the media. Again and again over the years she had this love-hate relationship with the media. She was a very great star, and great stars are often very attracted by the media at the same time as being repelled by the media. It does raise the question about whether or not, however, great stars are entitled to privacy. It's my strong view, and I guess shared by very many people, that they most certainly are. And this horrific tragedy that's just occurred a few hours ago brings that into sharper than ever focus.
How difficult do you think it was for the Princess and the Prince of Wales to have their personal difficulties played out across the tabloid headlines?
I think agonising. How else could it possibly be? Again, you put the word inevitable. Maybe it is inevitable because they were public figures, but the detail which they had to endure over a very long period was very difficult. I can't believe that it helped the resolution of the problems that they faced. I think at this moment, you think of the two princes and pray that those princes are given the protection now that they need from unwarranted intrusion. Now, a lot of journalists behave perfectly well. There are those who behave very, very badly. The Prince of Wales has now got to bring up his children as a sole parent, helped by others in his family and close friends, I'm sure. But it's going to be a very difficult and daunting task, and it's made peculiarly more difficult, obviously, by the role that he and they play in the nation's life.
And given the strength of public feeling about the apparent manner of the princess's death, pursued by paparazzi, and I'm talking now about the preliminary reports we're getting from our correspondents at Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace, who are talking to the people who are starting to gather there. Given that, do you think that that in a sense out of this may come a new degree of responsibility on the part of those sections of the press that tend to pursue people like the Princess?
It's really hard to predict. I'm sure that what will happen immediately, because of the wave of public distress and dismay at what has happened, and because those who are responsible for the media and in public life for framing laws are going to engage in a debate, that there will be a huge amount of attention devoted to not necessarily only the particular circumstances of this accident, but what it means about the relationship between the media and public figures. Now, whether that leads to anything beyond that, I don't know. I have already said that this morning, and I share the view that others have expressed, that say to the paparazzi, you are dreadful people.
You have also given me an education by teaching me more about life and living than any books or teachers could have done. My debt of gratitude to you all is immense. I hope in some small way I have been of service in return.
And that's it from GMTV on Sunday, the 31st of August 1997, the day the nation lost the Queen of Hearts. Coverage continues now on ITN.
Good morning. We've broken into the usual schedules this morning to bring you a special programme on Diana, Princess of Wales, who died a few hours ago. She was killed in a Paris car crash, robbing the nation and the world of a woman they'd taken to their hearts at the age of just 36. The princess died under the same spotlight in which she'd lived most of her life, fleeing with her friend Dodi Fayed from the press photographers who dogged her every step. Their Mercedes car careered out of control in a tunnel alongside the River Seine shortly after midnight. Surgeons fought for 2 hours to control bleeding in her chest, but were unable to keep her heart going. They declared her dead at 4 o'clock this morning. Dodi Fayed died at the scene of the crash, as did their driver. In the coming hours, we'll be looking back at Diana's remarkable life and hearing from those around the world whose lives she touched. Well, with me throughout in the studio will be ITN's royal correspondent, Nicholas Owen, and we have correspondents at Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace here in London, at Balmoral, where the rest of the royal family is coming to terms with the news, and of course in Paris itself. But first, Caroline Kerr reports on the terrible events of last night.
It was here in an underground tunnel alongside the River Seine that the fatal accident occurred in the early hours of this morning. The Mercedes in which the princess had been travelling with Dodi Fayed was wrecked beyond recognition. It had veered out of control as it entered the tunnel, apparently travelling at high speed. Police said they believed the car was being pursued by photographers when the crash happened. In spite of the efforts of the emergency services, Mr. Fayed died at the scene of the crash along with his driver. The princess was treated by paramedics at the crash site and then taken to hospital. Passers-by rushed to the scene. Some of the first to get there described what they saw.
One of the first 3 people in the tunnel. The driver was unconscious, sounding the horn for probably almost 2 minutes. Like she said, I approached the car, got probably 30 feet away, noticed liquid and a gentleman running at me, shouting and waving to leave the tunnel. We exited, sat at the mouth of the tunnel. It was probably 3-4 minutes after that the police arrived.
Witnesses confirmed that photographers were there at the time of the crash.
The gentleman who was taking pictures was there immediately following the accident. And his camera equipment was far too sophisticated for a tourist.
And there was a lot of arguing on the scene, a lot of loud arguing on the scene. And it was definitely with the photographer.
Ambulance workers initially managed to revive the princess, but at the hospital where she was taken, the surgeon who treated her said that her heart had already stopped by the time she reached the operating table.
Par le SAMU de Paris qui a effectué la réanimation initiale. À son arrivée à l'hôpital de la Pitié-Salpêtrière, elle présente.
When she arrived at the hospital, she was already suffering hemorrhaging in the thorax. Then she suffered a stroke. The lung vein was badly injured, despite the care and the heart massage, which was administered for 2 hours. Her death was recorded at 4 o'clock in the morning.
The British ambassador, who was also at the hospital, confirmed the tragic news.
Tonight's accident is a terrible tragedy. The death of the Princess of Wales fills us all with deep shock and with deep grief. And our thoughts and our prayers are with her family and her friends, and with the family and friends of the others who died in the accident. The Queen and the Prince of Wales and the Prime Minister have been informed of the accident and of the death of the Princess of Wales.
At the scene of the crash, French police seized a number of motorcycles. 7 photographers, all apparently French, were arrested. They're being questioned at the city's crime squad headquarters as witnesses to the accident. No charges have been pressed as yet. As the wreckage of the princess's car was towed away in the early hours of this morning, the French Interior Minister paid tribute to Diana, a woman whom he said was well loved in France and who will be greatly missed. Outside the British Embassy in Paris, the Union Jack was flying at half-mast, as Paris and the rest of the world wakes up to the news that Diana, Princess of Wales, died here last night.
Caroline Kerr reporting there. Well, now to Nicholas Owen, our royal correspondent with me here in the studio. Nicholas, the initial reaction of anyone waking up to this news is going to be immense shock, disbelief.
Yes, Dermot, it has been the most appalling night, I have to say, for any of those of us who've been involved in covering these events, and as you say, as people wake up and digest the full nightmare of what has happened. But can I just say this before we start? Our thoughts must be, first of all, with those young princes, the sons, William and Harry. Everybody knows what sort of mother Diana was, a superb mother, and cared so deeply for them. They've been at Balmoral with their father, the Prince of Wales, and with other members of the royal family, and learned the terrible thing that happened. They learned that in the early hours of this morning, and it's just the most unimaginable tragedy, of course, for that family. Beyond that, yes, a terrible sense of shock. I think not just here, right across the world, and I think that's what we're going to be hearing a great deal of. Everybody, everywhere, is going to be horrified by this. We are talking about the most famous person in the world, frankly. The brightest star, whatever the arguments, the controversies, the embarrassments occasionally. She was a magnetic personality, and she will be fantastically missed.
Questions, of course, being asked now about the level of press intrusion into her life.
Yes, indeed. I mean, the poignancy of her ending her life in this way, pursued, as far as one can tell, by the paparazzi, or paparazzi, the expression, the Italian expression that's used about these sort of people, unofficial photographers, really, who hope to get that one picture that will make them an absolute fortune. Some accounts say that the car in which she was in, provided by the Al Fayed family, having left the Ritz Hotel, went into that tunnel at about 120 miles an hour. Now, maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration, but it was obviously going terrifically fast when you see those pictures of the appalling damage. So one can only imagine that the driver had been told, you know, there are those photographers again, step on it, get us out of here. And of course, with the most tragic and awful consequences that we can see. So, and now police inquiries are underway to see exactly what did happen and so on. But we are told there were scenes at the accident. Caroline Kerr mentioned it, beatings up and so on. It's an appalling turn of events.
OK, Nick, thanks very much indeed for the time being. Well, across the country and indeed the globe, people have been waking up to the news of the Princess's death and reacting with the same horror and sorrow. The Queen and the Prince of Wales issued a statement saying they were deeply shocked and depressed. The Prime Minister said he too was devastated. He said Diana had been a wonderful, warm and compassionate person, loved throughout the world. That thought was echoed by President Clinton, who said he'd been profoundly saddened at news of the Princess's death. Andrew Simmons reports.
Britain woke up this morning to a numbing shock and sense of loss. At Buckingham Palace, a sombre gathering of people unable to express themselves with words had started laying flowers at dawn. It was the Foreign Secretary on the other side of the world about to leave the Philippines who gave the first British government confirmation that the Princess had died.
I am greatly shocked by this news. Our first thoughts must be with her children and with her family at this time of immense loss to them. I was fortunate to have the opportunity of working with the Princess on her international charity work. I believe what has happened is a tragic loss at a young age of someone who'd shown great courage and commitment in drawing attention to serious issues. For the next few days, her family and the nation must have time to come to terms with their immense sadness and loss. In the longer term, serious questions will need to be asked as to whether the aggressive intrusion into her privacy has contributed to this tragedy. Thank you.
The Prime Minister was kept in touch throughout the night. He described Princess Diana as a wonderful, warm and compassionate person loved by people throughout the world. The Conservative leader William Hague said the whole nation will be in shock and in tears at this awful news, a reaction echoed by the Liberal Democrat leader.
How does one react to an event which is so terrifying, so sudden, so unexpected and so horrific for obviously all those concerns? And one's first thought of her family, the princes and her wider family, and indeed that of Mr. Al Fayed. Beyond that, I think this is a moment for reflection and sadness. A light has gone out of our lives and the lives of the nation, and that's a matter of most appalling sadness.
Just after dawn broke, there were flowers outside Harrods, the pride of the Al Fayed Empire. Inside, shock and anger at the loss.
The world has lost a princess who is simply irreplaceable, and Mr. Al-Fayed has lost his beloved eldest son. And I would like to say that Mr. and Mrs. Al-Fayed, who are together in Paris, are simply devastated by their own loss and share the sorrow of the princess's family.
A Lambeth Palace spokesman said the prayers of the whole Church of England would be with the families of the princess and Dodi Al-Fayed. And Cardinal Basil Hume said she will be remembered with great gratitude by so many of those who she endeavoured to assist in so many ways. Princess Diana's former press secretary, Jane Atkinson, was in deep shock.
I don't think I could believe it. When I went to bed, I knew there'd been an accident and that she was ill. And I think it's unbelievable. And I feel very sad for her family.
The disbelief was shared by market stall holders in London's East End.
And the guy that was going to Liverpool Street, he just stopped over there and he just stood and cried. And at first I didn't realise what he was crying about. And then when he told me, I just stood here. I couldn't believe it.
I feel terrible, you know, really. I don't really feel like working, you know. It was such a shock.
She was good, she was lovely, and I just feel very shocked. I feel a lot of people would be the same today.
Very, very upset. Very upset. I think we all do.
Spontaneous acts of sorrow are spreading throughout Britain on this solemn morning. Many are gathering at Princess Diana's London home, Kensington Palace. The first simple messages which begin to express overwhelming grief amongst the people of Britain. Andrew Simmons, ITN.
Well, we had quite a lot of political reaction there, and our political correspondent Tom Bradby is in Downing Street now. Tom, what is the Prime Minister doing today?
At the moment, the Prime Minister is in Sedgefield at his constituency home with his family. We believe he's about to go to church. After that, his plans are not quite clear. He was due to come back here to Downing Street sometime around in the late afternoon at 6 o'clock, they were saying originally. It's now not certain whether he will come here. There's some suggestion that he might go to Chequers. Downing Street are making it clear that what has to be immediately decided is whether there's going to be a period of official mourning and how long, and they're making it clear that the Prime Minister will want to be involved in those arrangements.
Tom, have there been any comings and goings there at Downing Street? Are the press team there saying anything?
The press team are absolutely besieged by calls, as you could imagine. They're just trying to get out the basic statements. The Prime Minister, as you've heard, has been up since the early hours this morning. He's been kept informed, initially making clear his shock and distress at what he heard. Then they're now, of course, trying to deal with the next stage, which is what they're going to do about, as I said, this period of official mourning. There are calls coming in from all over the world, so it's actually very hard to get through to the press office. It's very difficult for them getting out the Prime Minister's views. But no, there are very few comings and goings. The Prime Minister, as I say, is up in Sedgefield. Apart from that, of course, it's the middle of the recess, so I mean, normally one would expect politicians to, if it was during the week, to be arriving already and giving their views. There's very little of that at this stage, except that, of course, a number of senior politicians across Westminster knew the Princess of Wales, had known her, not perhaps well, but had got to know her over the years and were very impressed by her charm, and they've started to give their reactions. But here in Downing Street, there's very little going on.
Tom, for the time being, thank you very much. Well, the Princess's death comes at a time when she appeared to be making significant strides in both her public and private lives. In recent months, she'd enjoyed tremendous success in her campaign to get a worldwide ban on anti-personnel landmines, winning backing from countries across the world, including the government here. And her private life seemed to be entering a new phase, thanks to her blossoming friendship with Dodi Fayed. Ian Glover-James reports.
In the last months of her life, it seemed the princess was forever on the move, a restless lifestyle never out of the public eye. Unburdened, it seemed, by heavy security. This was the image the princess chose to portray. The caring campaigner for humanitarian causes. Here, against landmines in Angola. She'd cut down on the causes she worked for, but the cruel injuries inflicted by mines, long after conflicts like Bosnia had ended, affected her deeply. Her fame generated huge publicity for what were once little-known issues. Simply by being photographed with the disabled victims of landmines ensured those working to remove them won unprecedented support, even in the White House. By now, her fame as an ambassador for good causes was truly international, and she was seen with some of the world's most celebrated figures. She seemed at ease in a role she developed for herself and was greeted enthusiastically wherever she went. She was named Humanitarian of the Year in America and mixed with that nation's most powerful and influential figures. Here with Colin Powell, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Henry Kissinger, the former Secretary of State. The princess's sincerity in this role impressed America.
They seem to possess a never-ending supply of compassion for their child.
It wasn't always so high-powered. She twice flew to Pakistan to support Imran Khan's cancer hospital. And it was here that a photograph of a caring Diana cradling a sick child was to spark her last and controversial press interview. That photograph inspired the French daily Le Monde. Her interview started a political controversy on landmines, and this being just after she celebrated her 36th birthday party in London, she said press intrusion in her private life was so bad she'd have abandoned Britain years ago, were it not for her sons. But her taste for a high-profile lifestyle, this was Gianni Versace's memorial service in Italy, sometimes sat uneasily in the minds of the British public with the role of mother of the heir to the throne. Her response was to escape from the pressures of public life, press pursuit and judgmental columnists who had an opinion on every facet of her life. Even the wisdom of a trip to the cinema or a holiday on Mohammed Al Fayed's yacht was questioned when the royal princes were involved. It was her friendship and holidays with Dodi Al Fayed, the Harrod's heir, that ensured the last weeks of her life were never out of the headlines. Dodi Al Fayed seemed to give the princess the close companionship she sought. Her charm, her elegance and her popular appeal stepped outside the boundaries of establishment tradition. The princess seemed to give Britain its first truly modern royal. Ian Glover-James, ITN.
Just to let you know, we've broken into the usual schedules here on ITV to bring you a special programme on Diana, Princess of Wales, who has been killed in a car accident in the early hours of this morning in Paris, along with her companion and friend, Dodi Fayed, and the driver of their car. They were apparently being pursued by paparazzi on motorcycles and were trying to evade them. Our correspondent, Tim Hewitt, is at Buckingham Palace now. Tim, what is the scene there?
It's a very sombre atmosphere here, as you'd expect this morning, Dermot. The crowd's been building up. You can probably see behind me now to several hundred people. A lot of them are tourists, by the way, but a lot of them aren't. The crowd has been building up here since before light. Some of the first people to arrive were a group of students who we met at the gates of Buckingham Palace who'd heard the news as they were leaving a nightclub, and they'd each come with a single rose to lay at the gates of Buckingham Palace. And most of the early visitors here were, of course, not surprisingly young people, but they all spoke about the particular affinity that they felt as young people with the Princess of Wales and how much of a great loss they thought her death was. We've heard nothing official from the palace yet. We still don't know when we're going to get any further statements from inside the palace or, of course, when the royal family are due back. But the crowds are building here all day and will continue to build, I'm sure. There are, of course, a lot of journalists here, a lot of photographers, a lot of cameramen, a lot of reporters. It's not easy for them either, and there have been some fairly unpleasant scenes. Some of the people who've gathered here have felt that the press are not welcome. A French television crew had insults shouted at them. But by and large, the atmosphere is a very sombre one indeed.
Tim, one guesses if there's quite a few tourists there that not everybody is aware of the terrible events that they're actually finding out at the gates of Buckingham Palace if they've just come along for a day out.
I think that's right, Dermot. A busload just arrived, a coachload of Japanese tourists who went up to the gates, were surprised to see the flowers, obviously didn't realise what was going on, were taking photographs of themselves and so forth. But I think as the day goes on, more and more people who aren't tourists are going to come here to pay their respects. And of course, as I said, up to now, most of the people who've come have been younger because I suppose they're the ones who are up later or possibly get up earlier in the morning or are out and about in this part of London at this time of day. But I'm sure as the day goes on, this area in front of the Queen Victoria Memorial here is going to become very full. The police have already started to put up barricades to keep people in certain positions. Of course, no cars are allowed through here anyway on a Sunday. So I'm sure by the end of the day we are going to see a very, very large number of people here just come to express their grief.
Indeed, Tim. Thank you very much indeed. Well, Ronald Allison, a former press secretary to the Queen, is with me now. Mr. Allison, you must share the nation's profound sense of grief.
Yes, I mean, it's several hours now since I heard the news, and it still hasn't come home to me in any real sense, and I'm sure that that is the feeling of everybody, literally, throughout the world who's now aware of the news. Nick was saying earlier on, you don't have to be in any way particularly well informed just to imagine the impact on all the members of the royal family. And as a father, as many of us are parents, fathers, just the thoughts of the two young boys, because Prince William is still only 15.
Well, one's heart does go out to
Absolutely.
them. She was particularly close to the boys, wasn't she?
It seemed to me that given under all the circumstances of what had happened, that both the Prince of Wales and Diana, Princess of Wales, were doing a splendid job as parents, if I may say that. It's a bit presumptuous, but clearly a very difficult situation, a family that was broken up under any circumstances, and to be the royal family. And yes, she seemed to be doing superbly well as a mother, and she and the prince came together at all the important times in the lives of the two boys, and were making life family life as much a reality for them as was possible under the circumstances.
It has been said that whatever passed between the parents, the boys, the princes, were off limits.
Absolutely, yes. No question about it. They loved both their parents. Both their parents loved them. They were on the whole pretty well treated by the media, and at Eton Prince William has been left alone, and this recent holiday up at Balmoral with the photo calls, the press have kept away and let them grow up in reasonable privacy.
Well, of course, the press and the media feature large in this whole affair. You, of course, were a former press secretary to the Queen. Did you witness at first hand any of the kind of level of attention that the Princess commanded?
In my time, there was nothing of the intensity of the interest that has been in the Princess, right from the word go. From the time of the engagement, some of the pictures that we've been seeing right the way through. I had one conversation with her before she was married, and in which she said, well, of course, talking of the intensity of the press interest, of course, once we're married, Italy, I said, I'm sorry, it won't. And when she announced, whenever it was, some years back now, a sort of semi-retirement, again, in this very studio, we were discussing this. No, it was going to be with her, always.
So she was totally unprepared for it?
At the time
of her marriage?
Yes, she was. She had, I don't think she, and perhaps that those around her couldn't have foreseen quite the intensity, because she was such an unusual person. And when you have somebody like her, who's just, apart from anything else, so beautiful, and that every editor will put her on the cover of every magazine as often as possible, and so on and so on and so forth, it was bound to build up into something that was almost too much to bear.
Well, building up to the present day, it had become a frenzy, an absolute frenzy for photographs of her and Dodie. It's been said that a photograph of those two together could command hundreds of thousands of pounds, if not millions.
Mm. Yes, and that was the case. I mean, I would always draw a distinction between the staff photographers, those photographers working for publications in this country, who are answerable to their editors, and who Palace Press Office can talk to the editors, as I did in the past on occasions, and ask for some level of cooperation, and as happened up at Balmoral this summer. And the contrast between the staff photographers and the freelancers, or the paparazzi, as they like to call themselves, who are a law unto themselves, but who are still paid enormous sums of money by editors if they get the picture that everybody seems to want.
So there are different levels of press attention. There are those that abide by some rules, some give and take, and those that will stop at nothing for a photograph, effectively.
Yes, indeed, that is the case now.
And we suspect that it was those paparazzi that were pursuing her and Dodie last night.
Well, that seems to be what's coming through from Paris. That doesn't mean that they are as such to blame. That's not for us to say, but I mean, going back to my much quieter times, there were occasions when members of the royal family were pursued by photographers. They were in their cars, and some photographers riding pillion, somebody driving the bike, and the photographer riding pillion with his camera. It does happen, and we've seen what a consequence of it can be. Whether one can't yet say a direct consequence, but undoubtedly.
Well, Alison, thank you very much indeed. French police say Princess Diana and Dodi Fayed were being pursued by press photographers on motorbikes, as we've just heard, when their car careered out of control. 7 of them were later detained for questioning. It was the kind of hounding she'd been forced to get used to, but had often resented, not least in recent weeks, as her friendship with Dodi Fayed flourished. Jennifer Nadel now examines the princess's difficult relationship with the press and looks at what repercussions their apparent role in her death will have.
For the last 17 years, the princess's every move was followed, recorded and scrutinised by the press. Whether trying to steal a few precious moments on holiday with her children and friends, or simply trying to work out at her London gym. Photographers and editors alike knew her face, and the fairy tale that went with it would always sell. Most recently, photos taken of the princess in Saint-Tropez with Dodi Fayed sold for hundreds of thousands of pounds. The Sunday newspaper that bought them raised its price and its print run. In her interview with Panorama, the princess said she was all too aware of her value.
It took a long time to understand why people were so interested in me, but I assumed it was because my husband had done a lot of wonderful work leading up to our marriage and our relationship. But then during the years, you see yourself as a good product that sits on a shelf and sells well.
Calls for tougher laws that would have afforded the princess greater protection were recently rejected. Today, the government said it was too early to say what changes, if any, should be made.
I think there has been concern in Britain, in the press and the media, that there should be a line drawn and that it should be drawn by a responsible press and by responsible media, rather than having it drawn for them by others, with the development of a stronger press complaint system. And I'm certain that that is the right way to go. The paparazzi clearly wouldn't have been pursuing her were it not for the fact that the photographs that of her that they took earned so much money for them.
Editors themselves say privacy laws would be unworkable.
I cannot see any change in the law that would be remotely effective in stopping incidents like this. I just can't. I think it is possible that, I don't know in this particular case, it's possible that this was technically an assault. In other words, there is a role for the criminal law in protecting people's persons and property from harassment.
At Buckingham Palace this morning, mourners were clear about where they laid the blame.
But why did they pay so much money for the photographs? Why were the paparazzi after them? If there was no money, in the photographs, they wouldn't have been after her in the tunnel.
Whatever the difficulties of providing greater protection for those in the public eye, there will clearly now be a stronger than ever desire for change. Jennifer Nadel, ITN.
Well, the terrible accident happened in the French capital. For the very latest, we're joined from Paris by our Europe correspondent, Bill Neely.
Yes, you join me at the Salpêtrière Hospital, where the body of Diana, Princess of Wales, has lain now for nearly 7 hours since she died at 3 a.m. London time. Behind me, outside the doorway, Parisians, and they are mostly Parisians, have been leaving flowers, bouquets, huge bouquets, tiny posies for about the last 2 or 3 hours. They've been coming up steadily, one by one, and outside the hospital there, that floral tribute has been growing now for the last few hours. A few hours ago, doctors gave a very detailed medical statement of what exactly they tried to do to revive the Princess of Wales. They said Diana's death was recorded when surgeons gave up their bid to restart her heart after massive internal bleeding in her chest. The ambulance workers at the scene had initially tried to revive her, and in fact had managed to revive her, but the doctors say her heart stopped beating almost as soon as she arrived at the hospital due to massive blood loss inside her chest. They actually tried for about 2 hours to restart her chest, but at 3 a.m. London time, her death was declared after no effective circulation could be re-established. It's not quite clear at the moment what will happen with the body of the Princess of Wales. There's been speculation that it may be flown back to Britain as early as this evening. So a crowd has gathered here, maybe 200 people on both sides of the road, and a crowd indeed had gathered this morning at the spot where the crash happened. I actually managed to get into the tunnel to the very spot where the accident had happened, and there the police have very carefully marked the road with white chalk. The first marks as you go down into the tunnel. It's a very steep incline after some bends and twists on the road. The first thing you see are the marks of the wheels on the road, where the police believe the car began to veer to the left. Then there is a mark on the curb where you can see a chunk of concrete out of the curb where the car hit the curb. At that stage, it began to go up onto its side and up about another 50 meters or so. It was traveling very, very quickly indeed. Whether it actually landed on its bonnet or not, we don't know, but it certainly crashed with great speed into the wall of the tunnel. Dodi Al-Fayed was found apparently dead in the back of the car, and the Princess of Wales was taken out of that car. The police, we know, have taken 4 motorcyclists, journalists, photographers in for questioning, and they have confiscated cameras. They will be processing the film from those cameras and seeing what they can see. They have taken the motorcycles and scooters into custody as well. I spoke to one man who claimed he had spoken to a taxi driver at the scene very shortly after the accident. The taxi driver claimed that the car in which the princess was traveling passed his taxi at a huge speed. He says it was 140 to 160 kilometers an hour. Now that would be in or around 100 miles an hour. On that stretch of road, and it is a very fast stretch of road, that would have been extremely fast for that stretch of road, because the road goes in and out of tunnels. As I said, it dips down, the road curves, and then 100 yards into the tunnel at the Alma Bridge is where the crash happened. As I said, the body of the Princess of Wales was taken to this hospital, where for the last few hours, in fact, I think you can see some doctors and nurses outside. The mood here is very somber and silent. Diana, Princess of Wales, was actually well loved in France for her sense of style, for her frequent visits to the country. It was clear she enjoyed France, and France enjoyed having her here. But one final word on the investigation. The police say they are investigating the crash as a possible case of manslaughter. So we certainly haven't heard the last from the investigation. The police officers are still at the scene. They're still examining the chalk marks, and they're still literally pacing out the site of the crash from the beginning of the tunnel to the appalling scene in the middle, now covered in sand and glass and the gloves of hospital workers and emergency workers who tried to revive Diana last night. The flowers were beginning to arrive there, petals being strewn on the road. That area will be closed off for some time. And I think, like London, Paris this morning is in mourning. Back now to the studio.
Thanks very much indeed, Bill. Well, tributes have been pouring in from all corners of the globe. Tim Wilcox in the ITN newsroom has been monitoring those tributes. Tim.
Well, yes, Dermot, as you say, tributes pouring in from all over the world, with everyone talking about her humanitarian work and stressing the empathy and rapport she had with the normal man. Baroness Thatcher has just issued a statement on the Press Association wires. She said, "With the tragic death of Princess Diana, a beacon of light has been extinguished. Her good works brought hope to so many of those in need throughout the world. Above all at this time, my thoughts are with her sons who have lost a truly wonderful mother." She goes on to say, "My sympathies also go out to the other families involved in this horrific accident." Imran Khan, the former Pakistani cricket player and friend of the princess, you might remember she went and visited a hospital which he's inaugurated in aid of his mother. He said, "I'm deeply shocked and grieved. The world has very few people like Diana who work so devotedly for the well-being of the poor, deprived and downtrodden people." The Clintons, as you're aware, have already given statements on the princess's death. Former US Secretary of State Henry Kissinger who again was filmed with her recently in New York, said of Diana, again on the Press Association, "I knew her as a very sensitive, at times very amusing lady who desperately wanted to make a difference in this world." Back to you, Darren.
Thank you very much indeed. We got some news just in. A spokesman for the Prince of Wales has said that arrangements are in progress for the Prince of Wales to go to Paris. She could not confirm when that might be. Now let's go to our political editor, Michael Brunson, who's in the Sedgefield constituency of the Prime Minister, Tony Blair. Tony Blair has been week-ending there. You're outside the church, I believe, that Mr Blair attends, Mike.
That is right. Mr Blair will be coming here in about a quarter of an hour. He has come up to his constituency. He had a political meeting yesterday and he is in his home just a couple of miles or so away, and he will come here and he will make a statement. He was woken up at about 2 o'clock this morning with the news. He then apparently tried to get back to sleep, but I suspect, like anyone who's heard that kind of news, he was unable to. He then began work with his press secretary, Alistair Campbell, who is in London, by telephone, working on the statement that he issued. You've already heard about that statement, but you will know that it says in there, Diana was a wonderful, warm and compassionate person whom people not just in Britain but throughout the world loved, and that she will be mourned as a friend. Now, Mr Blair will say much the same thing when he comes here, but he will make some other points as well. What I gather he wants to say is that he thinks that Princess Diana was a real asset to Britain. And in fact, he had had a meeting with her quite recently. There'd been a lunch at Chequers, to which Princess Diana and one of the young princes came, and that was an opportunity for the Prime Minister and Diana to talk things through. And of course, they had begun to come quite close over this whole business of landmines. As you know, one of the first things that the government did was to announce the ban on landmines, and so they were talking generally about how things could be taken forward and how Diana's role could fit into all that. Now, as to what will happen later today, Mr Blair will attend this service. I gather that he will be reading one of the lessons. He will then go back to his home. He will then go back to Chequers, but of course, very much in his mind and everybody else's mind are the arrangements, not just for the funeral, but the arrangements for political life herein. And I understand that it is most likely that there will be a suspension of campaigning for the Scottish and Welsh referendums. As you know, we're in almost an election situation at the moment, and I understand that there will probably be an agreement among the political leaders that as a mark of respect to Princess Diana, the campaigning in those elections should be suspended.
Mike, a suspension of campaigning, but the polls still go ahead on the dates arranged.
Yes, at this stage there is no suggestion that the polls will be cancelled, but I think that there is the feeling that life just can't go on quite as normal. Quite obviously not for all of us, it can't go on as normal, and so as a mark of respect, it has happened before when these things have happened, campaigning will be suspended. But as I say, what the Prime Minister wants to get across is that he thinks that Diana, in a sense, through her youth still, was very much in tune with what the government was trying to make the sense of Britain at the moment, that it was, if you like, there was a fresh start abroad, that there was a sort of youthful feeling about so much, and that he thinks that Princess Diana chimed with that despite all the difficulties of the marriage, all the difficulties that she'd had, all the difficulties indeed with her relations with the press, that she was an asset to Britain, that was someone who could do very great things for Britain, and he was very, very much behind her in that kind of work, and particularly in the campaign on landmines.
There were, of course, those comments attributed to the Princess very recently, ironically, in the French press, which were very supportive of the current government.
Yes, indeed. She had, as it were, put a fairly substantial toe into the whole political arena. And when that news broke, there was no sense at all from members of the government that they wanted to criticise her for what she was saying. At the time, one or two people said privately, they didn't want to gloat, but they said privately, well, you know, we're hardly going to criticise the Princess if she feels that this government represents her kind of views and the last government didn't. And so while there was no, if you like, great song and dance about it at the time, there was a feeling that, yes, the Princess and the government were, if you like, on the same wavelength.
Mike, thank you very much indeed. A reminder that we've broken into the regular schedules for this special programme on Diana, Princess of Wales, who was killed in a car crash in Paris early this morning. She and her friend Dodie Fayed were being pursued by photographers on motorbikes when their car crashed into a tunnel alongside the River Seine shortly after midnight. Surgeons at a Paris hospital tried to stem internal bleeding in her chest but couldn't restart her heart. They declared her dead at 3 a.m. British time. Dodie Fayed died at the scene. Well, in the studio with me is Ronald Allison, a former press secretary to the Queen. Ronald Allison, maybe too early yet to try and assess the Princess's contribution to life, but she had so much potential, yet so many achievements.
Yes, it is too early, as you say, but even at this point, and we've just been picking up from Mike Brunson some of the thoughts that the Prime Minister has already expressed and will subsequently be expressing. Tragedy, tragic, everything about it, that word sums it up. Just one of the particular points that makes it so tragic and so poignant, to me anyway, is that after the turmoils of the marriage and the divorce and all the rest of it, the Princess did seem to me to be establishing a role for herself. When she referred to herself as Queen of Hearts or Queen of the Hearts in the Panorama interview, one wondered a bit. But in the way that she was continuing her support for Great Ormond Street Hospital, for the victims of AIDS, for those who are HIV positive, and then latterly the campaign to get landmines banned worldwide, you could see a developing role. And it wasn't a role based on wishful thinking, because she could make a difference. She did command attention, as we know, but she was a powerful ally to have to any cause that you cared about. And for so many reasons, that the ending of her life in this way is a tragedy. But in terms of this particular aspect, it's particularly tragic. Maybe the work will somehow or other be strengthened by this.
I'm sure. We talked earlier about the Princess's almost naivety just before she married Charles vis-à-vis the press. As she matured, she learned how to channel that attention and use it as she saw it in very positive ways.
Well, there's a sense, I think, in which, as far as the press are concerned, she tried to have it both ways. Indeed, she was able to utilise the press. They were on her side over so many of the causes. But what she had to accept in the way that things are in this day and age, in this world in which we now are, that they didn't stop when she wanted them to stop. You couldn't shut the door on them and say, fine, now we've dealt with landmines, we've dealt with my causes, we've dealt with the lighthouse, we've dealt with Great Ormond Street, whatever it may be. It went on and on and on, and that was where she was finding it extremely difficult to come to terms with the relentless and intense attention.
OK, Ronald Allison, thank you very much indeed. Well, let's cross now to the Princess of Wales' London home, Kensington Palace. Helen Wright is there. Helen, I can see quite a crowd gathering behind you there. What is the mood?
The mood is a very sombre one. As you say, there are people at the gates of Kensington Palace behind me. There's been a steady stream of people arriving here since very early this morning, bringing flowers, some lighting candles. Others have just stood at the gates in total silence, just looking at the palace, some comforting each other. One woman sat on the ground and prayed just outside the gates of the palace. One man was very overcome. He sat down and he wept very openly. Everybody here is just very shocked. There have been tourists arriving at the palace just to look round, as they would on any day of their holiday, and the news has been broken to them as they've arrived. Everybody obviously very upset at this tragic event.
Helen, I've been talking to Tim Mewett outside the gates of Buckingham Palace, and he's reported some hostility to the press and photographers there. Is that happening at Kensington Palace?
It is. Earlier on, a bus driver who was going past here stopped his bus and shouted at photographers, "I hope you're satisfied." One man I saw who brought flowers pushed his way through the press here and said, "I hope you're happy now." But those are just sort of isolated incidents. In the main, people are just here to express their sadness. They're not really judging the sort of circumstances of the accident. They're just trying to come to terms with what's happened.
Helen Wright at Kensington Palace. Thank you very much indeed. Well, Nicholas Owen, our royal correspondent, is with me in the studio now. Let's just try and pull the strands of this together. Enormous, enormous shock reverberating around the world now.
Yeah, enormous shock, obviously, and you know, practical things to worry about at the same time. The matter of what will happen with the princess, some suggestion that her body may come back to Britain later today, and then the funeral, what would happen to that? I mean, some people might say it's all too early to think of that, but of course events will begin to take over. And what seems to be happening is that, as all senior members of the royal family, she is entitled, if that is the right way of putting it, to lie eventually at rest at St George's Chapel at Windsor. And I think that unless she'd expressed a personal preference for somewhere else, that's probably what will happen. A funeral service, I would guess, at Westminster Abbey in London, and then interment at Windsor, and probably, well, maybe the end of the week, maybe the beginning of next week. But I have to say, you know, the impact all the way around, the royal family, for example, I was talking to somebody has been very, very close indeed to the Queen. And I said, well, you know, what was Her Majesty's attitude to the Princess? And she said, well, with the Princess of Wales, life was always dramatic. I think this is what the view inside the palace was, you know. The Queen was as tolerant as she could be. I don't deny there was a note of impatience now and then, this person said, but the Queen's door was always open. She always tried to be helpful. And I think there was a sort of feeling in the palace, much as there is the country at large, that, you know, some of the things the princess did, I mean, I found this when I was following the princess around the world, attending things with her and covering her as a journalist, that there were some occasions when the things she did sort of infuriated you almost. I admit it, there were days when all seemed terribly mad, and then there were other times, the majority of times, when the sheer goodness of what she did, the sheer power of her personality, the way she could change things, that also came home to you very, very forcibly indeed. And I think this country and this whole world is a great deal poorer this morning.
OK, Nick, thank you very much. Well, I'm joined now by the writer and royal biographer, Hugo Vickers. Mr Vickers, what will be the reaction amongst the princess's staff? As we were hearing there from Nicholas, she was tremendously loved by everyone who worked for her.
Oh, I think anyone who came into contact with her will feel it extremely strongly. I mean, the general public who only perhaps just saw her passing by are feeling it strongly. So anyone who has worked with her are going to be extremely upset, because she was a very memorable personality. I mean, you know, the few times that I met her over a period of 15, 16 years, I remember so clearly every different time. And she did have a remarkable aura about her. I mean, she was, not only did she sort of transform herself from this girl from a good English family who was a kindergarten teacher, she suddenly became a princess. But then she became more than that, really. She really became a world star. I mean, she will be an icon. I mean, she's comparable to people like Princess Grace of Monaco, who did so much in Monaco. And it's because, fundamentally, I think everything, all her success and her, possibly, if you like, her occasional failings, all came from the fact that she had a good heart.
Well, Hugo Vickers, thank you very much indeed. Stay with us. We are joined now on the phone by the royal biographer, Penny Junor. Penny Junor, comes as a shock, obviously. When did you hear the news?
I heard at 5 o'clock this morning. When you phoned me, in fact.
And
it came
how would you assess the princess's life?
Well, I think I think she's had the most extraordinary effect on not just the British public, but on the international world. I think she put the royal family on a footing which really it had not had in recent times. I mean, she was a fantastic ambassador for both the royal family and for Britain, I think, across the world, and much loved.
There are, of course, going to be questions about the circumstances surrounding her death. The Foreign Secretary, Robin Cook, has said that there has to be a serious look into the aggressive intrusion into her privacy. She was almost besieged by the press, wasn't she?
Yes, I think she was, but I think that, I think it was a mixed blessing for her. I think she actually had found them less irritating than perhaps we would think. I think she used the press to her advantage on many occasions. And I mean, after all, it was the press that shot her to superstardom, and I think she enjoyed that status. And I think she would have been very miserable had the press left her alone.
The Prince of Wales, no doubt enormously shocked. You, of course, have been a friend of the Prince, written about him.
Well,
have you had any reaction from that quarter?
I haven't. I mean, I have no doubt that he will be absolutely devastated. And, of course, her children, yet again, are the people who are the real victims in this whole tragedy. I mean, they have suffered immeasurably from the breakup of the marriage, I have no doubt, and here they are yet again. And, you know, I mean, everyone's heart, I think, just goes out to the whole lot of them, I think, the Prince and his children.
They were, of course, enormously close, the Princess and her children. Is it possible to assess the impact on William and Harry?
Well, I think it will just be devastating. I just hope that they don't blame the press forevermore. I mean, clearly this accident happened because she was being chased, but I do understand that that is very much the norm in France, that the paparazzi do chase personalities when they see them getting into cars and shooting off. So, I mean, I would be very sorry if the boys were left with this kind of a bitter feeling about it. I mean, it is ghastly, it's a tragedy, but I hope that they will recognise how much their mother was loved and come out of it with some positive thoughts and not just negative about the press, as I say.
Penny Junior, thank you very much indeed. Well, let's go back now to Hugo Vickers, the royal biographer. Mr. Vickers, looking at Diana's life, it could be said that sadness dogged her from a very early age, from her parents' divorce.
Yes, I think it will be seen as a very sad life. I hope not too sad, because there were moments of... She certainly gave us all a lot of happiness for many years, and I think it would be a pity, but there obviously were. I mean, she had a pretty rotten childhood, and then she had huge disappointments when she realised that her marriage wasn't going to work, out. She said she wanted to be a good wife, and that was a terrible thing.
But it did seem in the past few months that the clouds were lifting. She was in a relationship she clearly enjoyed, and of course her charity work was going well, her work on landmines.
Yes, but at the same time, of course, she was always being dogged by controversy. I mean, the landmine question, I think, is particularly interesting. I mean, I always believe that it is her duty, really, to go out and when she sees something that's awful that is happening, to come back and tell us about it. But then, of course, you see the press always wanted to make more of it. They wanted to say she's getting involved in political controversy. I don't think she was. I think she just wanted to draw people's attention to this issue and then step aside. You'll remember that she didn't go to the House of Commons Select Committee because the press began to make a fuss about that. I think she must have found that extremely frustrating, that every time that she tried to do something which was constructive and which you would have thought was not controversial, it always came back to something where it was twisted around, that she was trying to steal the headlines and this kind of thing. And that is why, as so often happens, and we heard it even from her last week, this awful feeling really that a prophet is not without honour save in his own country, that in the world, out in the world, she'd become increasingly popular, whereas in this country, I mean, things weren't going so well, which is very sad.
Hugo, we've got some recent pictures of the Princess here. She had, everyone describes it, an immense aura surrounding her. Can you just talk a bit about the effect she had on people?
Well, yes, it's interesting, because I saw her for the last time, talk to her in June when she was presenting her dresses at Christie's in London. And I was a little bit worried because I hadn't seen her in the flesh for some time, and I wondered whether I was going to find this rather fragile individual that some people had been writing about, but not at all. You're quite right. She was extremely healthy, almost Californian, bronzed, very bright, just the same as ever, quick, amusing, friendly, making you feel that you were the one person she wanted to talk to.
There we see her talking to a little girl, getting the bouquet of flowers, and complete concentration, nothing false about that, is there?
Absolutely, and that was the two things that you'll find that the most successful princesses in history are ones who love children and care for the sick. Now, this is something which can't be faked, and in her case it was absolutely inherent and genuine. And of course, as far as the caring for the sick is concerned, as has already been discussed with Ron Allison, I mean, her work with very contemporary illness of HIV and AIDS was extremely important, what she did. And those were natural gifts, and for that she will always be remembered.
Hugo Vickers for the timing. Thank you very much indeed. Well, let's go back to Nicholas Owen, our royal correspondent. And we have some pictures coming in from the scene at Buckingham Palace. Let's have a look at them together, Nick.
Yes. That's the usual scene. No traffic, of course. It's being a Sunday. Some while ago they reorganised the road there and banned all traffic. But what we can see, if you look across the house, camera is beginning to show us, we move across the road there, a lot of people around. Now remember, the Queen and the other members of the royal family not there. They're up on their summer holiday in Balmoral, where they've learned the dreadful news. Reference to, Tim Ewart was telling us earlier, our correspondent there, talking about the number of people there who didn't really know what was going on, tourists turning up and being told the news.
They do seem to be milling around, don't they?
And I think the mood is going to be, we come back to this point and we shall hear a great deal more of it, Dermot, this idea that somehow the media in general will be getting a lot of scrutiny now. There'll be a lot of hard questions asked, a lot of resentment, anger, even fury that the princess's life should have been ended because of the activities of photographers. There you see more people up on the Queen Victoria monument there.
Sitting there motionless, almost.
Yes.
An air of disbelief there, isn't there?
Exactly. Normally there are people scurrying to and fro and jumping about. That looks to me, you know, there are people on the move, but it's pretty slow, and I should imagine the atmosphere there is just one of utter misery as everywhere else. It's interesting that the way people do focus on Buckingham Palace at times of national crisis, because of course it's Kensington Palace is the princess's home, a couple of miles up the road, and we've heard that there are lots of people there too laying flowers. But here we are, Buckingham Palace, focus of attention inevitably, and I think there'll be much more of that over the coming days.
Okay, Nick, thank you very much indeed. Let's cross the Atlantic now and go live to our reporter John Irvine in Washington. John, the wee small hours there, but there has been reaction, hasn't there, from the President?
Yes, the President has said that both he and his wife Hillary Clinton are very upset about the death of the Princess. They are on holiday on Martha's Vineyard, an island off New England. We're told they were attending a party tonight, and that when they were informed about the Paris crash, they embraced one another and left the function shortly afterwards. In a statement, the President said both he and his wife had been very fond of the Princess. The statement goes on, tonight our sympathy goes out to her family, her friends, and especially her children.
John, she was much loved there, wasn't she? And she loved America too.
Very much so. I think if Americans could have adopted the Princess, they would have done. America has had a long-standing love affair with her. For many people in this country, she was quite simply the most glamorous person in the world. People admired her for her work in humanitarian causes. One thinks of the fight against AIDS and more recently her campaign for a worldwide ban on landmines. Tonight, the former US Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger, described her as a woman who desperately wanted to make a difference in this world.
I well remember the clamour when she was at a charity do. I think it was in Chicago, I believe, where people were kind of falling over themselves to dance with her.
Very much so. I mean, one thinks also of the sale of her dresses up in New York. She chose to do that here. I think there was a belief, we looked at what happened over in Los Angeles about Dodi Fayed. He has a mansion over there. People here thought that she might possibly come and live in the United States. There was enormous sympathy for her here. There was nothing controversial about her. Americans genuinely loved the Princess.
John, thank you very much indeed. Just let me give you a reminder that we've broken into the regular schedules for this special programme on Diana, Princess of Wales, who was killed in a car crash in Paris early this morning. She and her friend Dodi Fayed were being pursued by photographers on motorbikes when their car crashed into a tunnel alongside the River Seine shortly after midnight. Surgeons at a Paris hospital tried to stem internal bleeding in her chest, but couldn't restart her heart. They declared her dead at 3 a.m. British time. Dodi Fayed died at the scene. And we are expecting to hear live from the Prime Minister shortly. Now in the studio with me all morning is Nicholas Owen, our royal correspondent. Nicholas, we're expecting to hear from the Prime Minister. I think he has summed up the nation's sense of shock.
I think he said something on the lines of, you know, this is absolutely everybody will be stunned by that, and of course he does speak absolutely for everybody there, doesn't he? I was reminded, John Irvine was talking about Chicago. We both talked about it there. I remember that very, very well indeed. That was a stunning example of the Princess's capacity to sort of captivate one of the most cynical and hard-bitten audiences in the world there. I just remember her coming down a sweeping staircase like all the movie stars in all the world you've ever seen, you know. I mean, that was amazing. And there was talk that she wanted to live in America, but that's an interesting point, you know. When she got back, I said to one of her people, well, does she want to live in America? Oh, no, she said, no, not really. She didn't really like all that close attention, so there was always this element with the princess that things were sort of, you know, up one minute and down the next. And again, I come back, I think I said this a bit earlier, and I say it again. You know, it's so human, really, that. I mean, the thing about the Princess of Wales is that, yes, she had a lot of faults and a lot of delightful sides. She was like, a lot of us would perhaps like to be only magnified, if you know what I mean. And it was that sort of personality that came through, whether the grand, high and mighty, or children in Angola whose legs had been blown off by landmines. Do you know, the whole gamut of humanity managed to react to her in some way or another.
There was, of course, talk about her living in America, as you mentioned. There was talk very recently about her perhaps leaving England if she developed her relationship with Dodie Fayed. But it was above all her children that really kept her anchored in Britain, wasn't it? Because they, of course, have to be brought up.
Yes, actually right. But in that recent interview she gave to Le Monde, a terribly serious French newspaper, not given to sort of covering the more flippant royal stories, they gave a very serious. She gave a very serious interview to them, and she said that her sons actually were rather saying to her, "Well, Mother, you really ought to go because of all this awful thing." And I think she said something on the lines of, "Any sane person would have done so." But no, she did feel very anchored. In the end, this was still the country that she wanted to be in. This is, her sons are going to be at school here, and of course, you know, her son William is the heir to the throne, and that was a responsibility she took enormously seriously. I mean, it was never any suggestion at all that you know, there was anything other than the dominant part of her life, really. I mean, there was this talk, you remember, it all seems so long ago and so silly, really, that she was somehow backing the idea that William would become the next king, you know. But, and then sort of skip past Charles. Well, I don't think she felt that way at all. I think she still retained a very clear image of what the destiny for herself and the country. Oh, here is the Prime Minister.
Here, yes, he is arriving at church in his constituency in Sedgefield. Just leaving his car there. His wife Cherie behind him, the children, young Catherine, and the boys, Nicky and Ewan. It's really pouring with rain there. We're expecting a statement from the Prime Minister. I don't know if he's going to say something before he goes to church or when he comes out. We are expecting him to stop and say a few brief words before he enters the church, where he is apparently going to read a sermon.
Prime Minister, can we please have your reaction to the news?
I feel like everyone else in this country today, utterly devastated. Our thoughts and prayers are with Princess Diana's family, in particular her two sons, the two boys. Our hearts go out to them. We are today a nation in Britain in a state of shock, in mourning, in grief that is so deeply painful for us. She was a wonderful and a warm human being. Though her own life was often sadly touched by tragedy, she touched the lives of so many others in Britain, throughout the world, with joy and with comfort. How many times shall we remember her, in how many different ways? With the sick, the dying, with children, with the needy. When with just a look or a gesture that spoke so much more than words, she would reveal to all of us the depth of her compassion and her humanity. You know how difficult things were for her from time to time. I'm sure we can only guess at, but the people everywhere, not just here in Britain, everywhere, they kept faith with Princess Diana. They liked her, they loved her, they regarded her as one of the people. She was the people's princess. And that's how she will stay, how she will remain in our hearts and in our memories forever.
Minister, we understand there may be a suspension of campaigning in the Scottish and Welsh referendum for the market respect. Is that something that is likely to happen?
Well, I'm sure that that will be considered, Michael, and you know, there are a whole lot of questions that need to be asked and answers that will be given. But just right at this moment, I don't think it's the right time. And
you yourself met her, did you not, just before she went on holiday to talk things over. Her mood then was very buoyant, in terrible contrast to what we are all thinking today.
yes, she seemed full of happiness, full of life, and she was great fun to be with, and she was an unusual but a really warm character and personality. And I will remember her personally with very great affection. I think the whole country will remember her with the deepest affection and love. And that is why our grief is so deep today. Thank you. I should say to you, I've already spoken to the Queen and the Prince of Wales.
The Prime Minister, Tony Blair, there speaking live outside his local church in his Sedgefield constituency. Nicholas Owen is with me in the studio now. Nicholas, an incredibly moving tribute there. I don't know if you saw two women actually bursting into tears behind Mr. Blair.
Frankly, I think Mr. Blair was close to tears, wasn't he? And I'm not surprised, because I think this is the ITN newsroom you can see behind me here, and I can tell you, Dermot will agree with me, I think, that there's been times in the last few hours when there's tears round here. I mean, the sense of shock and outrage which the Prime Minister talked about, a nation in a state of shock, he said. He said he was utterly devastated, and our hearts go out, as we were saying earlier, particularly to the Princes William and Harry, and he said, in our hearts forever. He was talking about the Princess, and then that lovely sort of personal note when he talked about she was great fun to be with, a really warm character and personality, and I think that was, you know, very much the way that we would all say that. There was, of course, the public and the private princess, and those of us who did have a chance to meet and talk to her, there was that side of her. It was sort of impish most of the time, I have to say, when you were relaxing, you know, not on serious occasions, of course, but there was that wonderful way, and she was jolly acute. She would spot, you know, the one thing that either you were interested in, or you were a bit sort of nervous of bringing up almost. You'd, I know you like X, Y, Z, don't you? You know, and there was this lovely way, and that wasn't a result of, you know, deep research or stacks of people passing her pieces of paper and all this. It was just human intuition, you know, and this was part of, and I think this was the sort of thing that we saw the Prime Minister alluding to there. That was a stunning tribute, and I think there was about 3 minutes or so of it wasn't there, and he said too, many other questions, postponing the devolution campaign and so on. We just don't know about those things yet, do we?
OK, Nick, thank you very much indeed. Well, let's go back to Sedgefield, where Mr. Blair just made that statement. Our political editor, Michael Brunson, was there listening to every word. Mike, the Prime Minister clearly speaking from the heart.
Well, I've never seen him speak quite so solemnly. He's normally a person, as you know, with quite a sort of lilt in his voice, but this has really hit him very hard. He heard about it very soon after the first news came through at 2 a.m. in the morning. He tried apparently to go back to sleep, but he couldn't go back to sleep, and so he's been thinking about this since 2 o'clock in the morning. And as you said earlier, a very, very moving tribute. I think he really spoke for us all in a sense there when he was talking about the way that Princess Diana could have such an effect with the sick and with the children by just a touch, just a look. He particularly picked up on that. And it is very much his feeling that here was a young woman that, despite all the tragedy, had potential to do so much. He personally felt that she was an asset to the country, a very strong asset to the country, that she embodied, if you like, that feeling of youthfulness which is abroad in the country. And you could see in how the Prime Minister looked and the tone of voice that he used, that he felt this enormous sense of loss, that's gone, that's been cut away. And the long pauses and as he spoke, he was thinking, as we all are, of, my God, what a terrible tragedy.
And the relationship, of course, went beyond that between Prime Minister and the mother of the future king. The families had got to know each other, hadn't they?
Yes, at one stage there was even a suggestion, you remember, that the Blair children might go up with them when the Prime Minister went up for the Balmoral weekend. Now, nothing came of that in the end. I gather that the invitation was extended, but that it was the Blairs who thought that perhaps that wasn't quite the way forward to go. But again, it gives you this impression of here's a young Prime Minister with a young family, and there is a young princess with the princes growing up. And I think also that we were beginning to see the development of a working relationship between Number 10 and the Prime Minister and the Princess. That had happened very much under John Major. If you remember, it was John Major who spoke to the Princess at very considerable lengths in the times leading up first to the separation from Prince Charles and then to the announcement of the divorce, terribly traumatic times, and Mr. Major had a good deal of contact with her there. And now Mr. Blair was beginning to establish that contact. As I said earlier, there'd been the luncheon at Chequers in the end of July, I think it was, with the Princess and one of the Princes, just going for a quiet occasion at Chequers, and then the Prince and the Prime Minister having a talk afterwards. And again, it's that sense, isn't it? It comes to us all that someone we've known, that we've just been speaking with, we've had dealings with, in this case in July, and then suddenly this awful news of a death in such terrible, terrible circumstances. And as I say, the Prime Minister, and as you picked up, the people here who were watching on the green at Sedgefield, the lady in tears as the Prime Minister spoke, and she was in tears afterwards. It really is hitting home very, very hard indeed.
Michael, thank you very much indeed. Well, as you might imagine, with these momentous events, probably the most momentous events of the late 20th century, there is enormous activity going on across the world. Information is coming in from all quarters, and Tim Wilcox in the ITN newsroom has been monitoring developments. Tim.
Yes, Dermot, it's not just national and international figures. Some of Diana's closest friends have been paying their own tributes as well to Diana. Rosa Monckton, who's married to Dominic Lawson, who was on holiday with the Princess just a few days ago, has spoken to the Press Association. She talks about the private side of the Princess. She said, "We've heard a lot about the Princess of Wales, the public figure, and I'd just like to say that as a friend, she was steadfast and loyal. And whenever I had any setback in my life, she was immediately there and would drop everything." She goes on poignantly to say that Diana did everything from the heart. Her heart ruled her head, which is why I think she was so often misunderstood. She was asked just before she stopped her statement about the boys, William and Harry. Harry, who is going to be 13 on the 15th of September, just a few days away. She said, "I can hardly bear to think about how they're reacting to this news." Back to you, Dermot.
Thanks very much, Tim. Well, I'm joined now by Mike Lloyd, a television cameraman who followed the Princess for many years. Mr. Lloyd, would you ever have hounded the Princess?
Not in this way, no. I think it was very bad the way they were doing the hounding over in France. I, in fact, actually gave up photography 6 months ago because it was getting harder and demands on this, and I didn't agree with actually hounding in this degree.
Was there an unofficial line over which you would not step?
Yes, there is. I mean, for instance, I was out skiing with Princess Diana, and I was up in the mountains, and we were doing pictures of her there having lunch, and she came over to me and asked me to stop filming. In fact, she put her hand over the camera, of which I said, "Fine, okay, we'll leave you alone. Sorry, I've interrupted you."
Well, we've got some of the pictures you shot yourself. Let's just bring them up here. Could you describe what exactly is going on?
Yes, this was out in St. Bart's when she went out on holiday. Sorry, this is in Spain when she went out on holiday with her friend.
I mean,
and this is at the airport.
She's clearly not happy there, is she?
No, she's not happy at all. But as you can see, I mean, we had to do the pictures if the still photographers are there, then we have to carry on doing pictures as well. But that is one occasion where it is a little bit naughty to do that. We would like to have been in one position, standing there, and just filmed her coming into the airport.
But there was almost a feeding frenzy surrounding the Princess. Frankly, there was just a lot of money to be made out of her. If you're a
there
freelance,
is for still photographers, that's correct, yes. Especially if she's with her boyfriend. But if she's on her own there, as a videographer, there isn't terribly much money in this, no.
Did you ever feel any sympathy for the Princess?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. She was hounded, but then again, she liked having a picture taken. She was forever posing for us. I mean, out in St. Bart's, we had a photo call of her in a bikini, in a beautiful red bikini, and she let us take all these pictures. And then the next day, she won't let us take any. So we never know where we are.
Questions are, of course, going to be asked about press intrusion as a result of all this. Do you think it's time for some kind of look at privacy laws?
Certainly, yes. For riding around on motorbikes at midnight, I don't think it's on. There's no value in those pictures whatsoever, really. The pictures of them kissing and cuddling, perhaps, yes, there's a value for them, but not sitting in the back of a car.
Mike Lloyd, thank you very much indeed. Well, Diana's death doesn't just rob the nation of a princess, it of course robs the two young princes, William and Harry, of a mother. They were told of her death this morning by their father, Prince Charles, at Balmoral, where they've been on holiday. Princess Diana had never made any secret of the fact that her relationship with her sons was the most important and special thing in her life. Harry Smith reports.
They are, according to those who know them, quite different characters. The two princes, pictured here at Balmoral with their father 2 weeks ago, will cope with their loss in quite different ways. The elder Prince William, who's often shown his dislike of the sort of media attention his mother has had to endure, is described as a sensitive, sometimes shy boy. At school at Eton, where he's been studying for his GCSEs, he's treated as just one of the boys, a status he's said to treasure and is keen to preserve. His school and the friendships he's made there could be a